I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, and I'm excited to get to know you as well. So, I currently am a supervisor of special education in North Brunswick for grades 5 through 8. And I also teach at Rutgers in the educational psychology department as a part-time lecturer. My background, I was a special education teacher. I've taught in inclusive settings, in resource room, and in self-contained settings and out of district. My passion really is on inclusivity and students with special needs and students who need additional support in the classroom. So when when I read about culturally responsive strategies and work to train our teachers, a lot of these practices really do apply. And in the virtual learning environment and the hybrid learning environment, there is a learning curve for all of us. We are all starting fresh, and they're integrating these practices in this environment can be challenging, but still just as meaningful. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what does it mean when we talk about a culturally responsive classroom environment. We're going to engage in an activity that reflects some of these principles. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain science and empowering students, and then kind of go through some strategies that could be used in your virtual learning classrooms. Many districts have some sort of hybrid model where there's in-person instruction going on, virtual. Some districts are completely virtual. So a lot of the principles that we talk about, I'll try to give examples of ways that these practices could be applied both in person and virtually, and then we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So this slide talks about the classroom environment. Cultural responsive theory has to do with the environment and the way that the teacher interacts with the students and how you're creating your classroom. So one of the most important principles is to keep a clear and challenging academic expectations in your environment. Students need to feel challenged. They need to feel that they matter and that the instruction matters. The important part is, while doing this, you want to provide the appropriate supports and scaffolding to support the students. Additionally, we want to have a high level of cultural competence, which means that we have an understanding of our own culture and our own experience, as well as an understanding or a willingness to learn to understand our students' cultures and our students' experiences. And then this kind of lends itself to socio-political consciousness, which is recognizing that we have worldviews as educators, as professionals in the educational field, and that our students may have different worldviews than us, and that we each have different experiences that shape our perspective and the way that we see the world. So keeping that in mind, when we're working with our students, one of the most important, or arguably the most important part of our instruction, whether it's virtual, in person, or a combination of both, is building trusting learning relationships with our students. We've talked a lot with our teachers about how are we pairing with students through this screen, through this platform, and how are we developing those relationships? And some of the strategies that we talk about today can help to build those relationships and to help students become more comfortable in this environment. One of the things we're going to talk about is creating opportunities for student-centered discourse, and creating opportunities and using activities that are a little bit more student-centered than totally teachers-centered. And additionally, in both virtual and in the classroom environments, we want to remember to be responsive to our students and to meet them where they're at academically, socially, emotionally. Teaching Tolerance, I should have actually linked the website here. It's a great website, and they have great resources on this topic as well. So one of the most important things about cultural responsiveness is student experience, and integrating student experiences into instruction where applicable, and just recognizing that the students have different experiences and inquiring and talking with students about their experience, about the way they see the world, and about the way they see topic and content. This will help us help our students to build background knowledge. Knowing where our students are coming from in their interpretation of content in a classroom will help us help them build background knowledge in a specific area that we're teaching, or perhaps we as the educators need to build our background knowledge. When the students connect their background knowledge with the new content, they're able to better understand the new content presented. And with this, we want to simultaneously raise our expectations for our students. I have a couple of quotes here that include: the culturally responsive teaching framework places students' cultural identities at the core of the learning process and utilizes the cultural knowledge, prior experience, frames of reference, and performance styles of diverse students. So we valuing students, where they're coming from, their perspective, their experience, their families, and putting that at the center of how we build our classroom environment and how we structure our lessons is important, because students feel valued, students feel accepted, students are more open-minded, and then you could really start to build those relationships with the students. Connection. So one of the challenges of the virtual environment is how do we build these connections with our students, and then how do we help our students in this format build connection between their culture, their language, and life experience. And then also building connection in the classroom. And additionally, I didn't put it on the slide, but building connections with classmates and peers. And when we're in-person instruction, a lot of times we use think, pair, share, or we use cooperative learning, or we use projects in small groups where students are interacting face to face. So how do we replicate that in the classroom? And how do we recognize that it's not going to look the same, but how are we structuring our lessons and our group work to help them build connections with each other and with us? An additional part of cultural responsiveness is also integrating cultural references into the classroom. Latson Billings talks a lot about this, and using cultural references in the classrooms helps to empower students and helps them to feel like valued members of the classroom community. And that's at the heart of cultural responsiveness. It's at the heart of inclusion. It's allowing students and staff in a classroom to feel a part of the community and feel valued. And that's kind of what I want to drive home today. It's helping recognize that every student, every staff member has something to contribute to the environment, to the content, to the instruction, and they're valued, and we appreciate what they have to contribute. So with that said, we're going to do an activity, and I want to explain this activity a little bit and why I chose to include it today. So the activity is called The Meaning of My Name. An activity like this could be done using a Padlet. It could be done using Jamboard. Today we're going to use the chat feature on Zoom. And basically what I'm going to ask, or what we're asking, is where does your name come from? What's the meaning of your name? Why were you named your name? And why is it significant? So asking this, there's two reasons. So this could be used as an icebreaker. I wouldn't use this at the very beginning of a class, but after really getting to know your students a little bit, it also allows students and people to express a little bit about their experience, about their cultural, where their name is coming from. Or, it could be something like my first name is Alexis, and I really think that it had to do with dynasty, but my parents don't admit to that. So that hasn't, it's not really a cultural reference, but it's something about me. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, you don't have to click on this link. This link here actually brings you to a Padlet. So if you were to use this in your virtual classroom or in your hybrid classroom, you could use something like a Padlet. You could use something like a Jamboard too, which is, it's through Google, and it's a shared space where students could contribute. They could draw on it, they could put Post-it notes, they could copy and paste images from the internet, they could work collaboratively on different projects for Jamboard. But for today, I just want to use the chat. And as you write the meaning of your name or the significance of your name, think about how this activity or how an activity like this could encourage cultural responsiveness in the classroom. And we will discuss that a little bit, and how something like this could be used to empower and engage our learners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize the presentation so I could see the chat, and you could begin to write the significance of your name. It could be a phrase in the chat, it could be a sentence, it could be a couple of sentences, and tell us a little bit about yourself. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, thank you for sharing in the chat. Just this quick activity allowed me to get to know you a little bit, and get to know, a little bit about your culture, your family, is a little bit about you, and it helps me. It's very interesting, actually, a lot of the different stories I'm seeing here. So think about this activity. And before we open up the discussion, right here is a video from students called My Name, My Identity. And the students talk about where their name comes from or why they're named their name. So I'm going to play this first, and then let's open up for a discussion.
My name is Mariah. I was named after my mom's best friend. People usually pronounce my name Maria, but it doesn't bother me.
My name is Lizette.
My name is Zach.
My name is Maya.
My name is Richard, and I was named after one of my grandfathers.
My name's Jaysha, and my mom gave me that name because she thought it would be nice. She mixed a bunch of names together, and it came out as what it is. It's kind of annoying when people say it wrong. It's usually Jaysha or Jasha, and it's really irritating. But I mean, other than that, I love my name, so it's perfect.
My name is Kamea.
My name is Omar.
My name is Deshaun.
My name is Arnold, and my name came from the Bible.
My name is Montserrat.
My name is Drayden.
My name is Mariah. My dad named me after Mariah Carey because he was obsessed with her. And sometimes when I'm spelling out my name or reading it out to like a big crowd, they usually misspell it or just say it as Maria. And it doesn't bother me to where like I go home and I think about it. It's just I would rather be called my name and not have it misspelled or misworded. Yeah.
It just gives you a little bit of an idea of how you could integrate an activity like this. But let's talk about it. How does this activity encourage cultural responsiveness in the classroom? Or how would you modify this activity to meet your students' needs? Or how would you present this activity in a different way?
And you have the power to unmute yourself, so you can go ahead and do that, and we can go from there. I don't think we don't have a huge crowd, so it's okay.
Yes, you could definitely unmute. Yeah, the correct pronunciation is huge. A lot of times in the beginning of class, I try to spend a lot of time making sure that I do have the correct pronunciation of people's names.
And it's so super important. I mean, so my name is Makeda, right? And so I get Makita, Marquisha, Marquita. I get anything that people want to kind of throw at me because they don't want to kind of look at it. And I get it. It's a little different. So you want to look at it a little bit carefully. But my name is Egyptian. It actually is, in Egypt, it's spelled M-A-K-A-D-A or M-A-K-E-D-A. But my parents, who had Ethiopian friends at the time, my name is Ethiopian, I'm sorry, I didn't mean Egyptian. But my friends, my parents who had Ethiopian friends at the time said, you know, this is a wonderful name. Another derivation of it is Saba. My mom and my dad thought the K was a little harsh, so they went with the spelling that's in South Africa and that's in Egypt and that's in the Philippines and in Sicily. So it's a huge historical name, and it's actually the Queen of Sheba's name, but it's not one that's known a whole lot. And so when you have to pronounce it, and when you want to make sure there's a pronunciation there, you have to make sure that you ask the student to tell you what it is. I had a teacher when I moved to Georgia when I was in high school who refused to learn my name and just called me Randall. Not okay, right? And what is it, 30 years later, and I still remember that. I told her that was not okay because I've always been outspoken, but it wasn't something that a child should have to do to an adult, right? So I think those are the types of things that we're talking about, right, Alexis? This idea of it's important because your name, someone put some thought into that. You know, my parents put thought into that. They spoke to friends. They were really like, what do we want to give her that speaks to her? And so those are the types of things that we have to remember when we just either butcher a person's name or just refuse to learn their name. And I know we're not doing that, but I'm just saying those are the things that we want to share when we're talking about this. I see Scott there. I saw he.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Dr. Rich. Hey, Dr.
Hi, Mr. Pastor.
How are you?
I am wonderful, and I am this presentation. I'm just lucky to be part of it. Hello to everyone. But I know we did this. I was part of a PSA Cultural Diversity Committee, and we did this as an icebreaker as well. And for me, my name is Scott, and, you know, I'm named for my father's father who had passed away before I was born. Mm. And again, learning about the different perspectives that where the name came from really gave me, even with people I work with daily, gave me some perspective I never had before.
Right.
And Dr. Weeks, it's sad that, though, to hear even 30 years later,
yeah,
because what you just said, that name is so important to each and every person, that respect piece. Mm-hmm. And I get all fired up even hearing that. And right. What scares me is things like that continue to happen at places
all day long.
And, you know, but again, I think with us, when we strive to learn that and make that connection, and that's such a small piece, mm-hmm. makes such an important impact on the students. And I know for myself, I've always said, even when I was substituting before I was a teacher, the feeling of as a substitute, you get a list, you know, substitute for 5 classes and have 25 names, 125 names. But I always said, even then, please, if I misstate your name, please correct me, because my goal is to have you understand that, you know, we want that relationship built. And that's one thing I would say. Yeah. I'm going to mute myself. I love hearing about this, though.
But absolutely.
I wasn't sure if I saw who else.
I've been watching the chat, and yeah, you know, Tori wrote about history and geography, and so much can be learned too. And I didn't even think about that.
Exactly. Lee has her hand up. Lee.
Oh no, I was gonna say I recognize Scott Passner. He was my daughter's teacher many years ago. So it was kind of odd to see you on here. So hello. And I started late, and I apologize. I didn't get on.
That's okay. Keith, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I would say, like, educators that do this, it sends an explicit and an implicit message that you are respected as an individual to the student. And that's so important to making those connections. So while you might not do this in the first part of the first days of the school year, doing it relatively early, I think helps you as well to not understand all the individuals sitting in front of you, but to build those respect relationships that you're going to need to discuss content, to discuss life issues, and just to discuss being human beings with all these other human beings that are sitting in front of you. So something like this is very important, and I think it's a very enjoyable way as well to learn about who's sitting with you, and to have respect be pervasive throughout everything you do in the classroom.
Definitely.
I love how you recognize, you know, how you talk about recognizing that there's human beings sitting in front of you. And, I think as educators, when there's so many demands and there's pacing and there's this and there's that, not that we forget we're working with human beings, but taking a step back and making the time to say, okay, yes, I'm working with a human and I do respect you and I want to learn about you and I want to know more about you, and because I want to support you, but because you're a valued member of this community. Yes, Amanda, about preferring a nickname.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you. Absolutely. And that does, because there's a lot of students who would prefer to be called something totally different, or who do not prefer a nickname. I've learned that as well. So asking them what a student or what a person wants to be called, I think is very, very helpful.
I'm following up. I think that's so important too, because some children, that identity of themselves with that nickname becomes part of them. And Mrs. Taylor, please tell Jessica I said hello. I know it's been probably, 9-10 years, but please send my best.
She graduated high school.
Oh, that means that I'm growing up too. I'm growing up too, I guess.
Yeah.
You look the same, Scott.
I see here that Kim says, which is really also to the idea around preferred pronouns, as well as we start to move forward and start to think about how we're addressing everyone, everybody. That is super, super important as well. This idea of how you see yourself, how you're perceived, what you believe, that's super important. And I think that when we poo-poo it away, you're poo-pooing away a lot of what this person is and believes, right? And so you have to be very careful around that and be very thoughtful, because you have to think of yourself in that setting and in that situation, and how do you want to be seen? And that's the biggest line,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great point. And also, I'm going to point out one more comment in the chat. The stories do give you a good way to remember the names, especially if you're working with a lot of students, and if you're maybe working in the middle school or a high school environment, or if you're at the university level and you see a lot of students, the stories can help you remember the student's name, what they want to be called, a little bit about their experience, and it allows you to just get to know people better. Excellent. And for me, this has always been something that's just very empowering for students and for people, and really just enjoyable to talk about where a name comes from and its significance. So thank you. I thank you so much for your participation in this activity, and I hope you could use some kind of aspect of this activity or the activity itself with your students. I want to transition a little bit to Zaretta Hammond and brain science. I find her very interesting in the way she talks about cultural responsiveness and the science of the brain. So I pulled a couple of quotes for this presentation that I think are pretty applicable in creating a culturally responsive environment. And when you look at culture, she says that it's the way that every brain makes sense of the world. And honestly, until I read that line, I didn't really think about culture in that way, but it makes sense. It is the way your culture is rooted in your experience, how you were brought up, and it is how you make sense of the world that forms your perspective. And she talks about students building their brain power to grow the existing knowledge they have. And that roots back to one of the first couple slides that talk about the experience of students and understanding their experience and helping them to grow their knowledge based on their existing knowledge. So I thought that was really important as we frame our lessons and our approach to our students in the classroom, both virtually and in person. Again, integrating experience into your virtual setup or your in-person or your combination, your hybrid setup, I think really helps students to feel comfortable, and it helps us to build the positive relationships. And it's important to remember, and it makes sense, that positive relationships are built on positive interactions. It's reinforcing. When you have a positive interaction with somebody, you want to interact again with them. It reinforces that connection and that relationship. So, when a student is praised, she talks about that the brain releases dopamine, and it's a positive cycle. When you talk about praise, it is important to talk about specific praise for students, so that it's not necessarily superficial praise, but based on the work that they're doing. And when people are praised, people respond to praise. When you're praised and you recognize that you're doing a good job, a lot of times you do want to do more. And this builds that motivation. And one of the things that I found in this virtual learning environment is that there's motivators that are in school and there's motivators that are in home. And for some students, there's similar motivators both in school and in the home. But for some students, there's different things that are motivated at home or motivating to them at home than what's in school. So finding what's motivating and then increasing that motivation so that the student will feel more comfortable and will connect virtually takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it because it helps solidify that relationship. And when students have that relationship with a teacher, they'll spend more time and attention working on a skill. Students respond to teachers that they feel comfortable with and that they like. If a student does not feel comfortable with a teacher, especially in the virtual environment, it's very easy to log off, to turn off your video, to not participate. And in school, there's ways that students, shut down as well. So it's finding ways to build that motivation that's so important, especially now, especially when we're in a time where students can feel extremely disconnected from their teachers, from their friends, from their family. So using that in our instruction, or just remembering that, I think could be very helpful. And, building trusting relationships or developing trust. And that takes time, of course. And it starts with students feeling that they're a valuable part of the classroom and that the teacher cares about them. When students feel and recognize that the teacher cares about them, it helps in developing a trusting relationship. And this is a key part of a culturally responsive classroom. And what trust frees up the brain for higher order activities. When students feel comfortable, when they feel cared for, when they trust the adults that they're working with, when they trust the peers, then they could really focus on the content, the activities, the higher order thinking in the classroom. So that's kind of at your core. That's what you want to do for all of your students. You want to develop those positive relationships and trust. And that's easier said than done, especially when we're in a virtual learning format, in a hybrid classroom. But honestly, when you're in person as well, it takes time to develop those trusting relationships and those connections. It's tough. It's challenging for students, but it's so worth it and makes such a difference in the classrooms. With that, I wanted to talk a little bit about bonding. So we talked about connection and trust, and social activities cause the body to release the hormone oxytocin. So this is what Hammond talks about. And that when you bond with others, it creates psychological safety. So again, this hones in on that connectedness in the classroom. And when students feel connected, they'll participate, they'll ask questions, and this helps them to engage in a growth mindset. So a lot of this is talking about how we're going to create those connections and how you're going to establish those bonds. And it's very tricky when you have students who are only in, I don't know if you're in districts that are doing a cohort model, or they're in a half day, or they're full virtual, or maybe they're in full day. The amount of time that they're interacting in person is most likely less than before we moved into virtual and hybrid learning environments. So it's taking these principles of building connections and relationships and translating them into a remote setup or a hybrid setup. So I wanted to also, with that said, talk about reality pedagogy. So this is a little bit repetitive, but I thought what was interesting that Emden discussed is the disconnect between sometimes our perception and the perception of students. So taking the time to understand where the student's coming from, even if as the educator, the educator might not agree necessarily with the student, but understanding their perspective and where they're coming from will help in the presentation of material and will help in the classroom environment. It will help also in understanding behavior. So Emden gave the example that there was a picture of a student with their head down, and they kind of looked totally turned off from the class, kind of was not participating. And the perspective of the teacher might have been the student just was choosing not to participate, was being defiant. However, when you ask the student said that I forget, he or she had their hand up and they weren't called on, so they shut down. So understanding that the student has a perspective and wanted to be called on, and as the educator, you can't call on everybody, but just understanding where that shutdown, where that behavior came from, will help the teacher when they're presenting the material or interacting with the student to understand where the student's coming from. And that also contributes to a culturally responsive classroom. So the next part of the slides gives some general instructional practices that you could integrate into your both the in-person and the virtual instruction. So using strategies like a think aloud and encouraging reciprocal questioning can help if you're presenting more of a teacher-led lesson, but you want some participation from students. Now, it's kind of awkward for students to participate in a forum like this sometimes. So using, I think Zoom and Google Meet are having some like emoji features, using raising your hand features, thumbs up features like that to just increase some engagement in your instruction is very supportive. Scaffolding material, understanding, figuring out where students are at and where their experience are at, and scaffolding your instruction to meet them where they're at is a supportive approach to maintaining high expectations, but supporting students to get there and understanding that there's steps that need to be taken to get to the level of expectation that is perhaps in the classroom. Using interactive journals. We have some of our teachers, it's so cool how they're using interactive journals virtually. A lot of teachers, when we were in person, used interactive journals as well, and students really liked them. They had different images and organizers, and it was a way for them to engage with materials in a way that was more friendly to maybe their learning styles. If they were more of a visual learner, if they liked certain organizers, and it helped keep the student organized with their material. And again, getting creative about cooperative group work. Zoom has breakout rooms. Google, I think, just came out with their breakout room. So using breakout rooms for students to interact and feel more comfortable speaking with each other, encouraging students to work collaboratively on an assignment, on a presentation, on a document, using the group chat feature for students to work together, and scaffolding students, helping them with the skills needed to interact with each other. So we talked earlier about building learning partnerships. Some teachers have used different activities in online spaces like show and tell or scavenger hunt to help students feel more comfortable. What I found very effective, and I think what some of our teachers have found effective, is gathering some feedback, asking students how they want to learn. And I might think this Jamboard I created is the most amazing thing since sliced bread, and it's so clear and it's so awesome. And the students might say, well, I don't really understand it. I'd rather this type of instruction. Or I really liked Dr. Rich, when you use the Flipgrid, can we do another Flipgrid? Just asking them their feedback, first of all, gives you an idea of your instruction. It kind of allows you as the educator to check, okay, how am I delivering my instruction? How can I make my instruction clear? What's engaging? What's not quite engaging? And it gives students kind of a say in their learning, and it helps them to feel empowered in the classroom, and it helps you to develop that responsiveness, because it's very easy to not quite to think something is clear. There's been plenty of times that I've presented a concept that I thought was very clear in my head, but when I delivered it, it wasn't as clear as I thought. So asking the students for feedback will help make the learning more student responsive in the classroom. And validating students and their families. So we have students who are still, still not comfortable with the technology. It's a lot to navigate if you're using something like a Google Classroom and you have a long stream of assignments and you have this Google Meet and that Google Meet and this Google document, and your computer has a ton of tabs on top. So asking students, what are you familiar using, and helping to teach them how to use the technology. When we started with virtual learning this year, our teachers really took the time to help students to navigate their classroom, where things were. I just had a teacher talking to us about how she figured out in Google Classroom that you could color code, and now all of Monday's work is a certain color and all of Tuesday's work is a certain color. And this really helps students to organize. But sometimes if you don't ask them what their comfort level is, we might not know. You might assume that, oh yeah, they know how to click on this Google Meet, but they might say, hey, can you show me how to do this? Using icebreakers, using student introductions, things of that nature really help to validate students and their families. This slide talks about a few strategies. I know we're nearing the end of the presentation, so I'm going to talk just a little bit quicker. I want to focus on English language learners. All of the strategies that we've been talking about help support our English language learners in the classroom. Scaffolding and supporting their background knowledge and directly teaching vocabulary and exposing students who are English language learners to vocabulary and vocabulary within the instruction will help them to build their background knowledge, and it helps you assess where their experiences are, and perhaps you could provide experiences virtually or in person that help them link the concepts to their prior experiences. Utilizing alternate assessments, presentations with the voice. We've talked with our teachers about maybe you could verbally assess a student. Using images. Jamboard has been a really nice, engaging strategy where students are able to get very creative in their responses to different activities. Again, we talked about some of these teachers and this gamified teaching, but a lot of times students are really uncomfortable participating in the virtual format. So allowing them to use emoji, to use the chat feature, to raise their hand, to helps just increase that engagement. It's the same kind of thing like in the classroom when you'd say thumbs up if you understand, thumbs in the middle if you're not so sure, thumbs down if you need me to explain again. Or it's kind of like if you use a whiteboard as a formative assessment. It's kind of like that, and I think that could be very helpful, and it helps you as the educator to gauge how your students are understanding the instruction. So we only have a couple minutes left, so I want to direct you to the end of the slides where some resources are. Over here, there's some choice menus and some virtual icebreakers that I think could be used as supportive strategies in the virtual classroom. Choice menus are an awesome feature that you could both use in person and virtually, and it helps students because it gives them a controlled choice essentially. And it allows you to differentiate for different learning styles. This slide talks a little bit about assessment and considerations for English language learners. This website here is a great resource, and that's where I got some of the information for this slide from. And I just want to direct you to this page here. Has a lot of great websites that I used as I was building this presentation. And it has a lot of really, in each of the websites have connecting websites with different resources and different literature that I think could be useful for you as you you work to increase your cultural responsiveness in the classroom, or if you're just here to learn about cultural responsiveness. These resources are really, I found them very informative. Here's a few more of them, and then here are the references for this presentation. So I'd really like to thank you for participating, and thank you for joining me today and for engaging in discussion. And my email address was on the first slide. So if you have any questions or you want to talk, I do apologize. I know there's not too much time for Q&A. We could probably take about one question, maybe 2 questions.
Can you show us your email again, or I guess the first slide?
Sure, absolutely.
Because I came in late.
Here you go.
Okay,
yeah. You're welcome.
Uh-oh, it went somewhere else. Oh, there it is.
It lagged a little. So yeah, feel free to email me if you have any questions, if you want more resources, if you want to discuss ideas or strategies or problem solve. I'm here as a support. I definitely, I'm learning right along with you, but there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. And the most important thing is that we're supporting our students and we're helping them to feel more comfortable in these unprecedented times. So I want to thank you. I'm going to pull up the chat one more time, see if there's any questions. So thank you.
Do we attend another meeting after this?
You do. So that's why I've got to get you out of here, because I know your next one starts at 4:05.
Okay, because I had problems getting into this one, so I wasn't quite sure. The little links on the flyer didn't work.
Yeah, it has a different link, so you can go back to the agenda and click on that particular link, that Zoom link for the next session.
It doesn't work on my computer for some reason. I wasn't able to get in. They had to send me a direct link.
Oh, okay.
So if anybody could send a direct link to me, I'd be.
Well, I'm not in charge of that one, so.
Oh.
But if whoever sent you the first one, they might be able to do the second one as well, because it sounds like it was more of the central location. So you can try the GSC, or that's the only way I can know how to do that, because we created our own links for each presentation, and then there's we put it on the major the doc, so I can't access someone else's.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
Thank you for an awesome presentation.
Bye, guys. Bye, Scott.
I see you again, Mr. Kastner. Oh, he left.